the Southern Ohio Farm Show. This is Gigi Neal of OSU Extension in Claremont County, agricultural and natural resources educator.
I'm James Morris, the Agricultural and Natural Resources and Community Development Educator for the Ohio State University Extension in Brown County.
Hello, my name is Richard Purdon. I'm with the Ohio State University Extension. I am the Ag and Natural Resource Educator for Adams County and the Community Development Educator for Adams County, Ohio.
And I'm Brooke Beam, the Ohio State University Extension Educator for Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Community Development in Highland County. And we will be your hosts for the Southern Ohio Farm Show. This morning, we're joined by Dr. Mary Kay Polschneider, who is a professor of food science at the College of Food, Ag, and Environmental Sciences at The Ohio State University. And when I was a student in undergrad, she taught a class about chocolate. And since we're going to be approaching Valentine's Day, it's a great opportunity to have more of a discussion about this agricultural product and some food science techniques. So what can you tell us about chocolate so we're more prepared for Valentine's Day and just enjoying chocolate in general?
Absolutely. Well, let me start with just a fun, kind of more of a methodical way to taste chocolate. So, a lot of people as a consumer, you get a piece of chocolate and, oh, it's so good. Or you get kind of some of that maybe mediocre chocolate, because there's no bad chocolate, right? But you get some of that mediocre chocolate and I'm not sure I would buy that again kind of thing. But to think about it from a little bit more methodical standpoint, you use all 5 of your senses. And so I love when I tell classes that, and even my college students are very apt to take that piece of chocolate and hold it up to their ear and say, how do I listen to it? But the first thing you do with any kind of food is that you're going to look at it. You feast with your eyes first, right? And so you're looking at it. And so you're looking at the color of it. And certainly people have preferences and they make that decision. Do I like this piece of chocolate based on the color? Is it a real light or white chocolate? Is it more of a milky, brown color? Or is it those really dark chocolates? And I think a lot of people have that predetermined idea that I really like the light chocolates, or I really, really like dark chocolate. And then sometimes they're surprised because it doesn't really taste the way that color looks, or they never really think about it and they just yum, right? But so you look at it, and then as professional evaluators, chocolate companies have people that are looking at their chocolates that are going to be looking for defects. And so you think about those little air bubbles. Everybody's melted chocolate at some point in time, and it's thick, and it'll trap those air bubbles in the little the molds that they form the chocolate bars in. And so you can kind of think about the quality of the chocolate that you have by looking for air bubbles. There's some really inexpensive chocolates that are going to have air bubbles in those corners every time. And then there's a little more expensive, relatively more expensive, but still very, very affordable brands of chocolate that you very, very seldom will find any of those air bubbles. And then the other thing that people look at is called bloom. And that's actually cocoa butter coming to the surface. There's nothing wrong with it. It looks a little funny sometimes. A lot of the chocolates that have peanut butter inside often have that bloom on the outside, even when you buy it fresh from the store, just because the fats don't work well together. They don't like each other. So cocoa butter and that fat from the peanut butter just are not friends. And so they actually will migrate to the surface and you get that little bit of greasy film. Some people don't care. Some people will find that off-putting, but it's not a safety issue. It's just a quality defect is what we consider it. So once you've looked at it, then you smell it. And that's always fun to think about the different aromas. Some milk chocolates, and especially white chocolates, are very milky or caramel smelling. Some of the white chocolates are even very vanilla, often described like buttercream icing, like a cake icing aroma, so much sugar in there. And then as you get on into those darker chocolates, you get more fruity aromas, or even some coffee aromas, some of that bitterness that we expect from coffee. We get a little bit of that in chocolate too. So the aroma is something that's really important to flavor. And we've heard, this past year with some of the symptoms of COVID, that people lose their sense of smell. And that really impacts how you taste foods. Usually you can still taste that salty, sweet, bitter, sour notes on your tongue, but you can't get all of those other detailed flavors. And so that's something to enjoy, to smell that piece of chocolate and get all of those details. And then, of course, listening to it, it's not talking to you like Snap, Crackle, and Pop do. But when you bite into it, you think, darker chocolates are going to have that real hard snap that you expect. But then milk chocolates oftentimes are very, very soft. And so nothing wrong with either end of that spectrum. It's what you like, but paying attention to that. And it's fun to compare those different kinds, and you get those differences in some of those details. So you're listening to it. And then, of course, now it's in your mouth. So you get to taste it and you get to feel it. Some chocolate, especially the very inexpensive chocolate, is generally kind of gritty. But then you have more expensive brands, or the little higher quality chocolates, that are much more smooth, and they just melt away and fill your mouth, and then you enjoy that creaminess too. So that's kind of some of the kind of a starting point for thinking about chocolate a little bit differently and a little bit more scientifically. Go ahead.
Great. That's a great way to kind of summarize. How do you start to taste chocolate if you want to get the differences and the different flavors? And one of the things that really sticks out in my memory from your class is that every time there was a different class, we would have different samples to taste. And that was a kind of an eye-opening experience for me, because I was a diehard just milk chocolate gal before, but then you opened my horizons to a lot of other chocolate flavors. And can you tell us about any trends or things that are popular, or things that you're seeing that get put in chocolate? Because I remember you talking about oranges, and I've seen more recently bacon. Are there other things that are on the trends?
I think what I have seen most recently is kind of trying to put anything in it. Bacon. There's a brand that's putting potato chips and Pop Rocks, and sometimes companies will stay more towards the fruity flavors. I know there's one that is putting like the dried banana chips into the chocolate. So not only do you get banana flavor, but then you also get that crunch factor, and so that extra texture interest. We are seeing a lot of different fruity flavors. I think that's been pretty popular for a lot of years now. There's some that have like a grape, or a blackberry, or raspberries, and you mentioned oranges, and bananas. That's not a real common one, but I have seen that a couple times. Just adding all those different kinds of things. S'mores are really popular right now, so getting those kind of flavors in there. There's some brands that are playing on kind of that health factor, that superfood idea. And so not only do you have the good benefits of chocolate and the flavonoids and those compounds in there that have some extra antioxidant properties and some health benefits, then they're adding in some of those fruits that have those kind of things as well. So certainly the berries, goji berries is one as well that plays into that idea that now it's a health food, right? We can eat our chocolate bar and have a health food.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, before we can wrap up and our discussion about chocolates, can you tell us a little bit about the process of how cocoa gets from where it is grown to how it gets into the final product that we're all enjoying?
Yeah, sure. So chocolate is grown, or cocoa, the cacao pods are grown on trees in tropical regions around the world. We actually get the majority of the cocoa from the west coast of Africa, Ivory Coast, Ghana, and those countries in that area are major producers. And so while it started cultivation in South America and Central America, through colonization and those kind of things, most of the production is coming from Africa today. And so once we have those beans that have been dried in those local regions, it's then shipped around the world. And first it's roasted. So somebody like Hershey or Ghirardelli or Nestle or any of those other companies that you might go to the grocery store and buy that brand name. Those companies are buying in cocoa beans, they're roasting them. And that's our safety factor. So these beans, they're an agricultural product, right? And so they are roasted, and so they have that contamination at that could be there. And so by roasting it, it allows it to be a safe product, and it also reduces the moisture in it a little bit more, and it also starts building those flavors. Think about any other food. If you put it into an oven and you get that nice brown roasted crust on it, whatever it might be, whether it's a meat roast or vegetables, anything like that roasting gives it flavor. And so then we take those beans and they're ground. The skin is separated off of it. The skin is very much like a peanut. If you have a peanut out of the shell and has that little papery skin. So that's taken off. It doesn't taste good. And so that's cracked and ground. And then that center of the bean that we call the nib is what we use, and that's ground. And then that becomes cocoa liquor. It doesn't have anything to do with alcohol. It's just what we call that ground cocoa. And the liquor can actually be pressed, and we get cocoa powder from that. But then separated out from that is cocoa butter. And if you go to your shower and you find cocoa butter in your hair conditioner, and you might find it in your hand lotion, you might find it on your lip balm, those kind of things. So there's different methods of different kinds of cocoa butter. But there's cocoa butter that's used for food, and there's different cocoa butter that's used for those different cosmetic things as well. But the cocoa butter is then added back into other cocoa liquor. And so that makes it then a texture that is able to set up and make a solid cocoa bar. Then we also add in our sugar and other ingredients, anything that's going to go in there and be made very smooth. So when we're talking about like the banana chips, that would go in later because we want that to actually have texture. But when we don't want the sugar to be grainy and gritty in the cocoa bar. So we'll add that in. It then goes through a refiner, and that breaks it down even more smoothly. And so it breaks up all of those little particles. So we get that nice, soft, smooth texture. It then goes into a machine called a conch. And the conch somewhat works the same way as a refiner in that there is some friction, but not much. This one is actually just stirring it. And the folklore around how that was created was that Mr. Lindt, of Lindt chocolate that we still have today in Switzerland, had this machine, and he was stirring his chocolate with it. And on Friday night, he was anxious to get out of work. And so he closed down his shop, but he forgot to turn off the conch machine, or this stirring machine. And he went off for a fishing weekend, and he came back on Monday morning and found that the chocolate that had been stirring all weekend, so this is 3 days now, right? That chocolate that had been stirring all weekend was actually much more smooth than anything else he had been producing. And so he realized that that was a very important process for getting that correct texture of the chocolate. And so, they conch it, and then finally it's ready to go through that last step, which is called tempering. And if you look on the internet, you can find all kinds of fun videos of these artisans that can temper by hand, and they have marble slabs, and they pour this chocolate out and they move it around, and they can tell by the look of it that it has been tempered correctly. And tempering gets all of the cocoa butter crystals in the right shape, and it gets them lined up so that they stack properly. And that's what makes very finely textured chocolate, that it's very stable and it's not going to bloom like we talked about earlier. And so that process of tempering, of course, commercially, it's done by a machine, and it takes the art out of it and makes it more of a science, that it is very much a temperature fluctuation, just like they do with steel. We've heard of tempered steel, tempered glass. It's kind of doing the same thing, making it less brittle and making the molecules line up correctly. And so once it's tempered, it goes into those pretty little molds, whether it's a bar, if we're making some of those bonbons, the circles, they actually take the mold, it's upside down, and pour chocolate into those cups, and then it's let to harden a little bit, and then that's dumped out. So it's filled up with chocolate, dumped out, and now they just have a shell. And so now they can put anything they want, any kind of caramel or cream or anything else in that center, and then make a little foot for it, a bottom for it with chocolate. And then it flips out of the shell, and ta-da, we have a cute little chocolate with something filled in the middle.
Well, it's definitely a multi-step process, with the end result is something that most everybody enjoys around the world. One question that I think is interesting to think about: how typically, if you have a bar of chocolate, or how long will that stay good? How long can you keep it?
So the chocolate, the cocoa butter itself is not going to spoil. So cocoa butter has a lot of vitamin E in it. And I mentioned earlier about antioxidants. Vitamin E is one of the best antioxidants that we know. And so that keeps cocoa butter very, very stable as far as tasting good. The problem is the other things in it. So if it's milk chocolate, you've got some milk fat. If you have nuts, or, like I mentioned, peanut butter in the product, those fats are going to go bad. But the chocolate in and of itself, even if it blooms and that cocoa butter comes to the surface, it could be retempered and it doesn't go bad. Now, a regular chocolate bar is going to have other things in it. And so you're probably going to see depending on how you keep it temperature wise and that kind of thing, you're probably going to see bloom in 6 months or so. But if there's other things in it, it could start tasting funny even shorter than that, 3 months or so. So what a lot of companies will do is they'll actually freeze it. So they'll produce, all of the Valentine's chocolate probably was produced probably in December. And so it's frozen and then it comes out of the freezer and goes to the stores. One thing that you have to be careful with is making sure that when it comes out of the freezer, it's thawed correctly. And so, if you think about, you get a cold bottle of water out of the refrigerator, it gets that water, that condensation all over the surface. And so you have to be careful not to allow that to happen on the chocolate, because that condensation will actually dissolve the sugar. And so then you'll get this powdery bloom on the surface. So being very careful. We can keep chocolate for a very, very long time, and it stays good. And it can be brought back if it has bloomed. So if it's retempered, then we can get back to that original texture even.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate all the information on chocolate, and definitely be some adventurous taste testing here coming soon.
Absolutely. I encourage everybody to try it out. Try out different flavors, even if you think you don't necessarily like it. Get some friends and try those 5 steps of using all of your senses to try some different flavors. I'll tell you, one of my favorites that I would never have expected is a chili chocolate. And that little bit of heat, especially there's some brands that do it really, really well, that have just a little bit of heat, but it's a really good kind of a medium darkness chocolate. So, absolutely. Be adventurous.
I'll add that one to my list.
All right.
Well, thank you so much.
You are very welcome. It's been fun.
Next, we are joined by Michelle Frost, who is the director for the Highland County Senior Citizen Center. She will be providing a demonstration on how they have made some adorable hot cocoa bombs this season. So Michelle, how have you been making these different cocoa bombs?
Hi, this is Michelle Frost, Executive Director at the Highland County Senior Citizen Center, and we're making cocoa bombs. Snowmen, green frogs, and cute little puppy dogs, all for the benefit of the operation of the Highland County Senior Citizen Center. We're going to be doing a bake sale. I couldn't find milk chocolate or dark chocolate anywhere, so white chocolate is what inspired me to create snowmen and frogs that we could dye green. I really suggest to use melting wafers because they are very smooth opposed to using chocolate chips. As you see, that is on the left, the wafers, and this little guy, we used chocolate chips for the eyes and he got chalky. You also want to use an oil-based food coloring to go with melted chocolate, otherwise your chocolate gets chalky. I've used 3 different molds. They're all silicone molds. The large mold is 2.75 inches in diameter. The snowman body, the bottom part, is 2.1 inches in diameter. And we use the cake pop for the head. You want to heat up your chocolate in the microwave in 30-second intervals. After the first 30 seconds, bring it out and stir it and then put it back. You don't want your chocolate to burn. We found it easier to use a spoon to make sure that you fill all of your molds. Make sure the chocolate goes all the way up to the top of the molds, and you're going to add a second coat. You can let it dry or pop it in the freezer, but make sure you get a second coat and cover it all the way. You want your sides to be strong in order for them to be durable. If you pop out a mold and it busts, you can always throw it back in and remelt it down. But the silicone molds make it pretty easy for them to come right out. When they come out of the molds, they're not going to be completely even, so heat a pan, not too hot. You don't want to scald your chocolate, and make sure that all of the sides are nice and even. Then you're going to add your cocoa of choice, your flavoring, Don't get it on the side like I just did there, or it will not fuse together properly. If you scrape it off, just make sure that your edges are still nice and even. Heat up the other side. You want to sandwich them together and make sure that they line up perfectly. The additional chocolate that kind of squishes out, you could use that to help fuse it together. Now we're going to go ahead and do the same thing with the head of the snowman, and I went ahead and add flavoring in the top part as well. As you see how the little additional chocolate, it's just perfect that you can blend that in. If you find a hole or something, you can take the additional chocolate in the pan and just smooth over. Now be really careful when you're adding the head to the body. You don't want to melt through the head and let all of your hot cocoa out. So just melt it together and set it on the top. And now you have your snowman. I melted down dark chocolate and put it in a piping bag. Make sure you don't cut the bag too thick. You want thin lines to draw arms and of course your cute little face for details. Ahead of time, out of white chocolate, I made the hearts and the carrot noses and sprinkled them with sanding sugar. I'm just going to fuse those together with some more white chocolate, add a cute little heart or two near his vest, and I always put the carrot nose at a downward angle to make it look more like a carrot. And there's your little snowman. The scarves are a little more tricky. You need to move quickly whenever you're putting the chocolate on because it can run. So if the chocolate's really hot, it could run down the snowman. If you hurry up and get the sanding sugar on as quickly as possible, it'll stop the chocolate from running, and you want to make sure that you pour the sanding sugar up underneath all angles of the chocolate. Next, we're going to work on our frog. The same thing, make sure the edges are even. Now, if you have chocolate that's colored with food coloring, it's going to be a little bit more noticeable, all of your little flaws that you may have. So we're going to have a little trick to that here in a minute. The molds that I used for the head of the snowman is what I used for the eyes of the frog. Because the green does show more flaws in the chocolate, I added 100% FDA underneath all angles of the chocolate. Next, we're going to work on our frog. The same thing, make sure the edges are even. Now, if you have chocolate that's colored with food coloring, it's going to be a little bit more noticeable, all of your little flaws that you may have. So we're going to have a little trick to that here in a minute. The molds that I used for the head of the snowman is what I used for the eyes of the frog. Because the green does show more flaws in the chocolate, I added 100% FDA approved edible glitter. Make sure it's FDA approved glitter, edible glitter, and added that to the frog. It made it more fun, colorful, and pretty, and it doesn't show as many as the flaws in the chocolate. I'm using white chocolate to pipe on eyes. And again, you want to be careful that the chocolate doesn't run. Let that dry. And then I added milk chocolate for my second layer of eyes and added a cute little mouth and of course a couple little warts because he's a little frog. And that is the frog. For the puppy dog, I went ahead and just drew the face. I'm not going to show that part, but the ears, you just want to pipe it onto wax paper and take a spoon and color it in. And then you're going to glue it on, or fuse it together rather, with more chocolate right around the eyes. So he's got wafer chocolate ears, but it's really just more chocolate that you piped. Again, using FDA approved edible glitter, and we just made him some rosy cheeks. If you're selling a product for a fundraiser, you have to list all of your ingredients. And of course, your labels and packaging need to have all the details on them. So we made sure that we listed every single ingredient, the sanding sugar, the FDA glitter, the white chocolate. All of the details are included in our labels. And now we have our little army of snowmen and frogs and puppies ready to go. And we're going to have a bake sale and hope that people really enjoy our product. We hope you had a good time watching this video, and stop and see us sometime at the Highland County Senior Citizen Center and enjoy some hot cocoa bombs with us. Happy Valentine's Day.
Thanks, Michelle. Those are absolutely adorable hot cocoa bombs, and I am definitely looking forward to enjoying mine this weekend. Our last segment of the Southern Ohio Farm Show for this week is a section on sustainability in the kitchen.
The kitchen is a great place to begin to embrace sustainable practices. One way to keep a sustainable kitchen is to minimize or eliminate the use of single-use plastics. This means not buying products that include unnecessary single-use plastics as packaging, as well as avoiding the use of these products for kitchen storage. So, why avoid single-use plastics? Single-use plastics are just that, plastics that are used once and then discarded. Much of the packaging used on the products we buy fall into this category. According to the National Resources Defense Council, 6.3 billion metric tons of plastic has been created in the past 100 years or so. Only 9% of that has been recycled. The rest of this plastic ends up in the trash and ultimately in our landfills and oceans. In fact, according to the NRDC, we discard enough plastic every year to wrap around the Earth 4 times. So, what can you do? The NRDC suggests the following simple actions that you can take to reduce your use of single-use plastics and increase your sustainability practices in the kitchen. An easy first step is to bring your reusable shopping bags with you when you head to the grocery store. Also, to avoid unnecessary single-use packaging, bring your own containers with you to the store and buy in bulk when you can. Limit the amount of takeout you and your family gets, because with takeout often comes single-use plastic takeout containers. The more you cook at home, the better. Avoid using items that will be discarded, such as plastic bags and plastic wraps, when storing food and leftovers. Instead, opt for items such as beeswax wrap, glass jars, and reusable sandwich bags. You can even buy or make your own plastic-free options for kitchen cleaners to avoid the waste that comes with traditional cleaners and single-use containers. By decreasing the amount of single-use plastics that you use in the kitchen, you're also decreasing the amount of waste that you create that will end up in a landfill or an ocean.
Thanks for tuning in for this week's episode of the Southern Ohio Farm Show. We'll see you again next week for another all-new episode. Keep warm, enjoy the snow, and have a happy Valentine's Day.